Bronson Reed and Roman Reigns clash backstage on WWE Raw. Things got heated backstage on WWE Raw when Roman Reigns confronted Bronson Reed over a pair of stolen sneakers. After last week's chaotic brawl, Reigns realized his custom kicks were missing, and all signs pointed to Reed. What happened next was intense: a backstage showdown, threats, and a near fight that had to be broken up by security. Is this the start of a brand new feud? Could this clash spill into the ring at SummerSlam? Watch the full video to find out what went down and what might be coming next in this wild story. The backstage corridors of WWE Raw are no stranger to tension. Rivalries erupt behind the curtain just as fiercely as they do under the lights. But no one expected a showdown like this. No one expected Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, the symbol of power, discipline, and legacy, to come face-to-face with a brewing storm wrapped in size 17 boots and brute force, Bronson Reed. And no one could have predicted that this collision would be sparked by something as unassuming and yet strangely symbolic as a missing pair of sneakers. It wasn't just any sneakers. They were custom, limited edition bloodline-themed Air Force Ones, designed exclusively for Roman Reigns to wear during a high-profile promo segment last week. Black leather, crimson detailing, tribal engravings across the heels. A one-of-one design that reportedly cost WWE's marketing team thousands. That night, Roman had made his way down the ramp, stomping the ground like a man possessed, only to return backstage with victory pulsing through his veins, only to later realize that his sneakers had vanished. At first, it was a joke. A running rib among the crew. Who would dare swipe Roman's kicks? One producer joked. But Roman didn't laugh. In fact, he said nothing. He stared at the row of lockers in silence, then turned and walked away. But that silence didn't last. It started as whispers. A crew member overheard something near catering. Someone else noticed Bronson Reed, fresh off his chaotic attack on Ricochet the week before, walking around in what looked eerily similar to Roman's missing sneakers. The tribal designs were visible. The same crimson stitching. The initials RR branded on the inner sole. The moment Roman saw the footage, the temperature backstage dropped 10 degrees. That Monday night on Raw, Roman Reigns arrived early. No entourage. No Paul Heyman. No bloodline shadows lurking behind him. Just Roman, stone-faced, clad in all black, pacing like a wolf preparing for war. Something about him felt off. Like a king walking into a kingdom that had disrespected him in the worst way. Bronson Reed was sitting on a black steel crate near the loading dock, earbuds in, bobbing his head to a track only he could hear. He had just wrapped up a backstage promo taping and was cooling off when he noticed a ripple in the air. The kind of ripple that only comes when the locker room goes dead silent. Roman Reigns was walking straight toward him. A production assistant tried to step between them. Roman brushed him aside. Bronson, Roman said, his voice low, calm, yet lined with unmistakable steel. We got something to talk about. Reed pulled one earbud out. Do we? Roman's eyes dropped for just a second to the sneakers on Reed's feet. Those are mine, Roman said. There was no anger in his tone. Just certainty. And that was somehow more dangerous. Bronson looked down, grinned, and tapped the side of the left shoe with the toe of the right. Didn't see your name on them. Roman stepped forward. Look again. The moment hung there like a loaded gun. Camera crews weren't even supposed to be filming back here, but word spreads fast in a WWE arena. Someone caught it on a cell phone. The tension. The postures. Reed standing like a slab of concrete. Roman coiled like a serpent. That footage would later be leaked online and shared by dozens of wrestling fan accounts within hours. But what fans didn't see was what happened in the next 30 seconds, what security and backstage officials tried to keep under wraps, because Roman didn't flinch. He took one more step, entering Reed's space fully, lowering his voice to a whisper only Reed could hear. Take them off, Roman said. Bronson stood up. That's when it almost exploded. The two men stood nose to nose, their chests rising. Bronson Reed may not be the tribal chief, but he isn't the type to back down from a challenge, especially one that calls him out over something as petty, in his mind, as a pair of shoes. But this wasn't about sneakers anymore. This was about respect. It was about territory. It was about Roman Reigns' rule. "I don't take orders from people who don't run Raw," Reed said. That line lit the fuse. Roman's hand clenched. A vein in his jaw twitched. Security darted in from both sides just as the moment threatened to erupt into a physical brawl. One veteran ref yelled out, "Do not throw a punch." But even as they were pulled apart, Roman's stare never left Reed. "This ain't about Raw," Roman muttered over the yelling, over the chaos. "This is about me. And you crossed a line." Bronson Reed, barely held back by two road agents, spat on the floor near Roman's boot. "I don't give a damn about your bloodline," he shouted. "I'm building my own." That line, "I'm building my own," wasn't just a jab. It was a declaration. And it struck at the core of everything Roman had spent the last 3 years building. His kingdom. His faction. His legacy. Roman Reigns walked away, but it wasn't a retreat. It was a warning. The footage that leaked moments later didn't capture the full exchange, but it was enough to send the wrestling world into a frenzy. Within an hour, hashtags like #Roman vs. Bronson and #Backstage Clash were trending on X. Fans were split. Some saw Bronson as a rising monster who was tired of being overlooked. Others viewed him as a reckless upstart who had just poked the most dangerous bear in WWE. But the real story? The real story was unfolding behind the scenes. WWE officials were scrambling. A SummerSlam card already stacked with big-name bouts suddenly had the scent of a new main event. Paul Levesque, better known to fans as Triple H, was reportedly furious about how the confrontation had gotten out of control. One anonymous staffer said, "This wasn't supposed to happen, not like this. Reigns isn't cleared for in-ring competition right now, and Bronson isn't scheduled for a feud with him. This could derail months of planning." And yet, there was buzz. Real buzz. The kind of buzz money can't buy. Insiders whispered that the confrontation wasn't entirely unplanned. That maybe Roman had let it slip he was missing his sneakers to certain people on purpose. That maybe Bronson Reed had been looking for a lightning rod moment to catapult himself from mid-card brute to main event threat. And when those two ambitions met, the powder keg was already lit. Roman's reaction after the confrontation was telling. He didn't head to his locker room. He didn't sit down. He walked straight to WWE President Nick Khan's office, shut the door behind him, and stayed there for nearly an hour. No one knows what was said. But when Roman left, he made one call to Paul Heyman. Cameras later caught Roman getting into a black SUV, face expressionless. He didn't speak to reporters. He didn't acknowledge the cameras. He simply closed the door and vanished into the Los Angeles night. Meanwhile, Bronson Reed stayed in the arena. He finished his night the way only Bronson Reed could, by squashing an enhancement talent in under 3 minutes in a dark match that had nothing to do with the earlier incident. But fans watching live said something had shifted. Reed wasn't just dominating. He was sending a message. He gestured toward the crowd mid-match, tugged at the custom sneakers, and smirked. This wasn't over. Sources within creative began scrambling the following morning. Writers who had previously mapped out the next month of Raw episodes were suddenly told to hold everything. A new direction was being considered. A SummerSlam twist. And while nothing has been made official, one writer reportedly said, "There's money in this. And Roman knows it." What's more unsettling is what Bronson Reed represents. He's not just another challenger. He's not part of a faction. He's not interested in tribal warfare. He's a wrecking ball. A chaos agent. The kind of man who doesn't need a title to be dangerous. He just needs a reason. And Roman Reigns may have just given him 1.4 years. Roman Reigns has stood at the top of the WWE mountain, untouchable. Even when he lost his title, he didn't lose his aura. He carried himself like a king without a crown. But what happens when a new monster steps forward, not for glory, not for gold, but just to burn the kingdom down? What happens when pride meets force? What happens when Bronson Reed steps into a world built on bloodline and legacy, and throws a steel-toed boot through the gates? That's the question now, and the answer might come at SummerSlam. The match hasn't been confirmed. The feud hasn't even been made official. But the seeds are there, planted in a hallway under flickering lights. watered by ego, by pride, by a pair of stolen shoes. And somewhere deep within the halls of WWE HQ, someone is looking at the footage again. Watching the moment Roman Reigns whispered, "Take them off," and realizing that the fuse wasn't just lit. Was already burning, and when it reaches the powder, all hell will break loose. By Tuesday morning, the incident had grown from whispered rumor to locker room legend. The footage of Roman and Bronson's confrontation had circulated through every major wrestling forum, reposted and reanalyzed frame by frame. WWE's legal and public relations team scrambled to contain the narrative, but the fire had already spread. No longer was this just about sneakers. It was about dominance. About disrespect. About a man like Bronson Reed daring to stare down the face of WWE and not blink. What followed was chaos behind the curtain. Reports flooded in from multiple sources that Raw's locker room had become divided in the aftermath. Several talents, mostly younger stars or those from NXT, rallied behind Bronson Reed, calling his defiance long overdue. One anonymous wrestler reportedly said, "Roman's been untouchable for too long. People are afraid to even look him in the eye." Reed just tore that illusion down in one move. But not everyone saw it that way. Veterans in the locker room, those who had fought tooth and nail to reach the main event, and those who had crossed paths with Roman Reigns in battle and blood, were reportedly furious. One longtime Raw superstar, speaking on condition of anonymity, called Bronson's actions reckless and stupid. He disrespected a man who built the table we're all eating from, the source said. Roman didn't get here because he stole someone's moment, he earned it. Bronson's stunt might get him a main event, sure. But at what cost? Paul Heyman, the man most synonymous with Roman's bloodline legacy, was unreachable for comment, but his absence spoke volumes. For the first time in over 3 years, Heyman was missing from both SmackDown and Raw. Rumors swirled that he had retreated to Florida for closed-door meetings with creative leadership and possibly Roman himself. One backstage producer described it as Heyman mode, silence before the storm. And if there was one thing Paul Heyman knew better than anyone, it was how to turn real heat into real money. But even as officials weighed the options, Bronson Reed doubled down. He posted a cryptic tweet the morning after Raw. Just an image. A single photo. The custom sneakers. Worn. Creased. Bloodline logo slightly scratched. Captioned with 3 words, "Come get 'em." That tweet exploded. Within an hour, it had over 4 million views. Roman Reigns didn't respond. Not publicly. Not on X. Not through his usual mouthpieces. But insiders say that behind closed doors, Roman was already making calls. Not to creative. Not to legal. But to Jacob Fatu. To Solo Sikoa. Even whispers of Zilla Fatu's name began surfacing again. The tribal chief had been challenged. Not by another royal. Not by a rival faction, but by a rogue monster with no allegiance to anything but destruction. And that made him dangerous. SummerSlam, now just weeks away, suddenly felt like a battlefield being laid brick by brick. Official posters didn't show Roman or Bronson. Yet the marketing department was reportedly holding off on releasing finalized graphics until this situation developed. One theory began to spread like wildfire through the online wrestling community, that Roman Reigns would return to action at SummerSlam not for a title, but for revenge. And that the match wouldn't be sanctioned. No titles. No rules. Just a backstage brawl, turned public. Fans were divided. Some said Roman was above this. That a man of his legacy shouldn't waste time on someone like Reed. But others argued this was exactly what Roman needed. That it was time for the tribal chief to remind the world, especially the locker room, that you don't steal from the king and walk away. The WWE Universe debated the storyline. But backstage, it wasn't just a storyline anymore. Security was increased at Raw and SmackDown tapings. Bronson Reed was told to stay in his own private dressing area. Roman was reportedly flown in through private transport and entered through alternate entrances to avoid unnecessary contact. The walls were growing tighter. Paranoia was seeping in, and then, it happened. At the latest Raw taping, Bronson Reed was cutting a pre-taped segment backstage, flexing his dominance, when a loud crash was heard down the hallway. The camera shook. The sound of yelling echoed through the concrete halls. People running. Production assistants ducking. The camera spun just in time to catch a blur of motion and a familiar black hoodie disappearing behind a steel loading gate. Producers rushed in to stop the feed. The camera cut. The feed never aired on Raw, but someone leaked it.I in the 10-second clip. You can clearly hear someone sounding eerily like Roman yelling, "You wanna wear my shoes? Let's see if you can walk in them." Bronson's face, turned toward the camera at the last second, was bloodied. Not badly, but enough to spark the internet's imagination. Roman had struck first. The war had officially begun. This was no longer a question of respect. It was now a question of survival. Reed had taken what was never his, and Roman, the man who built the bloodline on fear and loyalty, wasn't going to let it slide. Insiders now say the SummerSlam match is all but confirmed, though WWE has yet to announce it officially. Sources report it may be billed as an unsanctioned fight or shoes-off-the-table match, a tongue-in-cheek marketing twist that hides the very real heat between the two men. But beyond the punchlines and promos, the real story is deeper. This is a fight between eras. Roman Reigns represents control, dominance, legacy. Bronson Reed represents chaos, destruction, raw force, and somewhere in the middle of that friction lies the future of WWE's main event scene, because Reed doesn't want to join the bloodline. He wants to bury it, and Roman? He's not just protecting his sneakers. He's protecting his throne. And if SummerSlam becomes the battlefield, someone's kingdom is burning. The date was set. The tension was boiling. The WWE Universe was foaming at the mouth. But still, there was no official word. No promo package. No graphic. No sanctioned match until one Thursday afternoon. A simple black and white post went up on WWE's official Twitter account. No caption. No dramatic music. Just a shot of two chairs and a long table in the center of the Raw arena. A contract sat between them. The header read, "Unsanctioned, SummerSlam." Beneath it, two names were printed in bold: Roman Reigns, Bronson Reed. That was it.no explanation.no setup.no rules. Just war.by the time Raw rolled around the following Monday, fans had packed the arena with a different kind of energy. This wasn't just a storyline anymore. This was something primal. Something broken. A vendetta born not from jealousy or championship dreams, but from humiliation. The show went on as usual. Matches. Segments. Laughs. Surprises. But everyone in the building knew what they had come to see. And WWE, ever the master of timing, didn't disappoint. The main event was not a match. It was the contract signing. Bronson Reed was already in the ring when the lights dimmed. No pyro. No theme. Just low red hues and silence. Reed stood behind the table, arms folded, his face unreadable. A security team flanked each side of the ring. 5 guards on each side. No one trusted that this segment would end clean. And then the music hit. Roman's music. But what emerged from the curtain wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't Roman flanked by the Usos. Or Solo Sikoa. Or even Paul Heyman. It was Roman alone. No entrance robe. No golden gauntlets. No crown. Just a man in a black hoodie, hair tied back, walking with the weight of betrayal on his shoulders. The only remnant of the tribal chief persona? The intensity in his eyes. Eyes that hadn't flinched since Bronson Reed dared put on his shoes. Roman climbed into the ring slowly. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't even glance at Reed. He sat down. And then, he spoke. "You know what I realized?" Roman said, his voice raw, barely above a whisper. "When someone steals from you, it's not about what they took. It's about what they tried to prove." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You didn't steal sneakers. You tried to steal legacy." Bronson Reed didn't move. He stared straight into Roman's eyes and said, "You walk around here like you own this place. Like everything revolves around your name, your family, your story." Roman didn't blink. "I built this place on my blood," he said. "I carried this company through a pandemic, through empty arenas, through war, through betrayal. And you, he finally turned and looked Reed in the eyes. You want to take all that and boil it down to a pair of shoes? Reed chuckled. No, he said. I want to take your head. That was the moment it shifted. The audience gasped. Security tensed. Roman gripped the table so hard his knuckles turned white. But he didn't leap. Not yet. He just stared. Cold. Calculating. Calm like a storm before the flash. You think you're chaos, Roman said slowly. You think you're unpredictable. A monster. But I've stood across monsters, Bronson. I've buried giants. I've shattered legends. You know what they all had in common? He stood up slowly, towering now across the table. They all thought they were untouchable, until they touched me. Reed moved to grab the pen. Roman slapped it off the table. He snarled. You don't sign this yet. The crowd was electric. Security began stepping forward. Even commentary had gone silent. You sign that when you understand that this ain't gonna be a match, Roman growled. It's gonna be an execution. Bronson. Reed grinned. That kind of crooked, violent grin that belongs to men who don't fear death, but invite it. I'm not walking into a match, Roman, he said. I'm walking into your funeral. Then he signed in big, bold, sharp lines. Bronson. Reed signed the contract, shoved it across the table, and spit on it. The crowd roared. Roman looked down at the ink and spit. No emotion. He picked up the pen slowly, signed, then stood. The two men locked eyes. Security circled like wolves, and then, boom. The lights cut. A single spotlight, Jacob Fatu, standing at the top of the ramp. Behind him, Solo Sikoa. Behind him, Zilla Fatu. No words, just three men. Three shadows of Roman's legacy. Silent. Watching. Bronson's eyes darted toward them, then back to Roman. Roman smiled for the first time in weeks, and whispered into the mic, You stole from one of us. Now you deal with all of us. The show ended in chaos, but the message, crystal clear.